I have never bought a company or ever parachuted in as the CEO. I've only ever created companies from scratch. And so my experience is obviously one of the creator.
I'm going to respect your opinion. You have to respect my control. So if you're going to give me a really good suggestion, I'm going to act on it. I'm going to give you enough leeway, similar to what you did. You can always hang yourself if you do that, but I'll give you enough leeway. We're going to run with your idea, and then we're going to measure the results. And if it works, we're going to adopt it. If it doesn't, you're going to accept my way.
Can you give the audience some tactile advice on how you can shape a culture the way you want to do it? Welcome to Outsource to Profits. I have a fantastic guest here. Buddy, do you mind describing who you are, what you do, and how you serve the world?
Well, my name is Dr. Buddy Thornton. I'm the founder of Path to Knowing Academy, and I'm the founder of BCT Mediations Plus. We're a behavioral and forward-facing social and pro-social company. We create all kinds of training material for corporations, and we also focus on the parent-teen conflict space. And that's who I am in a nutshell.
Fantastic. Now, this is an interesting one. We're going to be talking about culture, but the formation and the ownership of culture. So I have never bought a company or ever parachuted in as the CEO. I've only ever created companies from scratch. And so my experience is obviously one of the creator. And there is no question that the founder creates the culture, good, bad, or ugly. You know, I think of like when we start an agency, I always write down mission, vision, values. If I think of the values of Get Levrg right now, as an example, one of them is overt communication, radical communication. And so my company, the amount of time, money, and energy we have invested in internal and customer communication, daily reports, weekly reports, Slack groups, like our customers are inundated with transparency because that's the culture I created. But I also created a culture in the past that's been negative, which was very much, I always give a lot of people rope up front in the sense that I give people almost like implicit trust up front. You have to take it from me. Well, sometimes that bites me in the ass because some people take advantage of that, or they don't have the self-discipline to work like I do. So the model that I created doesn't work for them. So Dr. Buddy, first question. And I want you to use two scenarios. Scenario number one, actually, let's not use I was going to use the scenario of a founder who creates the business versus a CEO parachutes in. But in your opinion, let's actually use the harder situation. Founder leaves. CEO is parachuted into a business. Culture already exists. Does that new CEO have the ability to shape the culture, let's say under a 12-month horizon, their way? Or is it a bottoms-up approach that comes from the history of the business and the creation from the users?
That's an absolutely a fascinating scenario. If you get parachuted into an existing culture, you really only have three jobs. Your first job is to understand the existing culture. Number two, you have to understand how that culture interacts with all stakeholders, whether it's other people in the human capital division, or if it is your external stakeholders, the surrounding community, or your end consumers. And then you have the drive to create a culture that blends your expertise and the reason you were parachuted in the first place with the existing culture to optimize the culture. That means that you're really asking me a question, and the only real answer is the only optimal answer is a hybrid culture. You have to take the existing culture, and then you have to not necessarily bend it to your will, but you have to understand it well enough to where you can be a leader and you can organically bring it to where it will be optimized in your mind, in your vision.
Let's keep playing on the same scenario. What are some things you run two businesses. Have you ever parachuted into a business, or have you always created your own?
No, I was parachuted into a third logistics business after I sold my two businesses.
Okay. So you have this experience. You parachute in. What parts of culture did you find easier to bend a little bit, or we'll call flex towards your style? And a year later, you look back and you go like, wow, we've got everybody moving in the direction that I am shaping, versus ones that were so entrenched or more difficult to change. Maybe it's because of the way the organization is structured. You just don't touch those people or that department enough to be able to shape change. Maybe walk through those two scenarios.
Well, I can only give you the one that I actually did. The first thing I did was I did two different types of analysis. One was from the external looking in. I talked to the customer base, all the end users, and a few of the competitive companies that we were bonded to or affiliated with, to get a sense of exactly where our positives and our negatives stood. At the same time, I gave an open door policy to anybody from the bottom up to bring suggestions to me with only one caveat. You can never walk into my office and say, well, this is how we've always done it. I did not allow those words to be used because I wanted to be a forward-facing C-suite person. And the only way you can really do that is to say, look, I'm going to respect your opinion, but what you have to do is you have to respect my control. So if you're going to give me a really good suggestion, I'm going to act on it. I'm going to give you enough leeway, similar to what you did. You can always hang yourself if you do that, but I'll give you enough leeway. We're going to run with your idea, and then we're going to measure the results. And if it works, we're going to adopt it. If it doesn't, you're going to accept my way.
Yeah.
And so I gave that type of a culture to that. And I also did the same thing with the clients. I said, look, I don't really care how things were done before. You have an existing contract. Tell me what works and tell me what doesn't work, and we'll adapt it from here. And if we have to write a new contract, do a new RFP or RFQ, that's what we're going to do. But we're going to move forward in an optimal way from this point forward. And it worked for me.
You said something really important. Ironically, I was on a walk this morning listening to My First Million, and Sean Parr, I think he was the one that brought this up. He was telling this story of one of his pet peeves is when another founder, he's trying to give advice to another founder, and a founder will say, yeah, I tried that one, or that doesn't work here. And he would just said that, like, rule number one in your culture is don't tell me, yeah, that's how we've always done it, or we've tried that and it didn't work. Because when you double click, or triple click into that question, using almost like Chris Voss's, what and how based questions, you inevitably find out they didn't measure it properly. They didn't give it enough time. They, quit halfway through. So let's come back to the original thesis, and kind of the main point of the podcast was, before we started filming, you talked about you're a believer that you, the founder, or you, the parachuted CEO, can actually change the culture like a coach does on a football team or a general manager does in a business, versus the culture permeating from below. And it doesn't have to have the team doesn't dictate the culture as much as some might believe that to be true. Can you give the audience some tactile advice on how you can shape a culture the way you want to do it?
Well, in my case, what I do is I get in on the ground level anyways. I don't know. There's been multiple examples across time and space over the last 40 years of people who walked into very, very poor cultures, and they've been able to adapt it to their vision. But it never works if you don't get buy-in from the human capital. That doesn't mean you have to adapt to them. What you have to do is you have to understand what their pain points are. So what I always did was I always will walk in and say, you need to tell me the one thing that would make you walk away. I want to know, where is your pain? And I want to know what I can do to help you with that pain. And then we're going to co-create this together. A CEO, a new guy coming in as a parachute, it doesn't matter how you get there. What you have to do is you have to understand that the value of a company is in its human capital. You could have the greatest widget in the world. If you don't have good human capital, you're not going anywhere. So I always focused on let's make the human capital want to be there. It's not a question of whether they fit or not. It's if someone doesn't fit, you can always hire somebody else. You can always bring in somebody else. But if you have people who do fit and you can convince them to give you their arm and their leg, you're going to win every time. Yeah. And so that was always my approach. Tell me what your pain point is. I'll remove the pain. Then let's co-create this wonderful environment together.
This has been fantastic. How do people get a hold of you if they want to know more about culture setting and more about your businesses?
Well, they can go on our website, which is simply Path to Knowing, and that's path with the number 2, knowing, all one word, .academy. Sets us apart from the .coms and the .orgs, just path to knowing .academy. They can click on my picture or they can click on contact me. We customize human capital work. We customize around our ACTRA model, which is attraction, selection, cultural fitness, retention, and then planned attrition, and a model I designed for my doctorate. And we use that to realign companies, flatten out their attrition rate, and we have had incredible success across. It doesn't matter whether it's a very small company, 10 to 30 people, all the way up to 500, 600, 800,000 people. I've never worked with a bigger company, but, you know, who knows what's on the horizon.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for being on Outsource to Profits.
Love it.
Thank you.